Okay, hello. My name is Hannah Lupe. I'm the managing editor for Young Adulting Review, an online magazine for kids and teen books. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of speaking with Jordan Scott. Jordan is a Canadian poet and children's book author. He has written 4 books of poetry and 2 picture books entitled I Talk Like a River, which was the recipient of the Schneider Family Book Award, and more recently, My Baba's Garden, which was released earlier this year. Thank you so much, Jordan, for taking the time to talk with me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, first, I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about yourself and your journey to publishing.
Yeah, I'm Jordan Scott, and let's see. Right now we're living on Vancouver Island. We're in a town called Royston in the traditional territories of the Comox people. And we've been here for about 6 years now. Before that, we were in Vancouver and then Toronto before that. So I'm a I'm a I'm a poet and a children's author as well. My journey into publishing has been uh, long. I guess it started a long time ago now. I started writing poetry when I was in high school,
Mm.
and then it wasn't until I got to SFU, Sun Fraser University, that I began um, sort of becoming a part of that what was called the Kootenai School of Writing, and all the kind of poets around like that school, like Stephen Collis and Lisa Robertson and Jeff Dirksen, who all became really wonderful mentors for me. So that sort of started my publishing journey in the poetry. And then children's literature didn't really start until about 2020,
Wow.
where a couple of years before that, I thought it would be really interesting to try that genre, um, just because of its relationship to poetry.
Mhm.
So it just kind of took off from there. It's been a really kind of incredible and, a fast moving surprise, I would say.
Yeah. Well, after having read your 2 children's books, they do read so much like poetry. Um, and that kind of brings me into my second question, which is the imagery in My Baba's Garden, both in Sydney Smith's illustrations and in your writing. It's just so gorgeous, all while depicting seemingly simple moments in the young narrator's day to day. I think one of the descriptors that really struck me was when he describes the mountains like whale bellies. When I
Mm.
read that, I was like, oh my gosh, like it's beautiful. So I was wondering that as a poet and a children's book author, what parts of your day-to-day inspire you?
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I think that I love those connections between poetry and and the type of picture books that I write.
Mhm.
Um, because poetry shares so much with that genre in terms of trying to really sort of distill moments and distill images and sound and space on the page itself. So I think I'm always, as a writer, I'm always paying attention to I mean, for me it's like the kind of ecology that surrounds me, what
Mhm.
it looks like, how it moves, how it sounds. But I also try to pay attention to, since I started writing picture books, I really try to access that, like sort of childhood wonder as much as I can.
Mm.
So I try to I try to imagine myself in those spaces and those times as a kid. And me having kids helps as well, just kind of paying attention to what they are asking. So I think for me, like kind of playing with my sons, hiking with them, going out into the woods with them, that kind of inspires me because we talk a lot, but then we don't talk a lot.
Yeah.
And I can just kind of observe and sort of I guess immerse myself in that kind of world that they exist in.
Mm. Yeah, that's awesome. Um, Both My Baba's Garden and I Talk Like a River are inspired by memories from your own childhood. Um, so kind of along the same lines, what is it like revisiting these moments in your creative practice as an adult?
Hmm, that's a really great question. I think like, I think for me, I was just in Berlin for
Mm,
uh some like for the literature festival, and I met with like hundreds of children, and it was like super adorable and really inspiring, really wonderful.
mm,
And some of the younger children, they kept asking if the character in the book would come, and then sort of not, they were really asking very interesting questions like, did that really happen to you?
mhm,
And they were asking it in a really kind of earnest way, like they really wanted to know if those things were true or not.
mhm.
And I think that I wasn't expecting that question, right? Which
Yeah.
was really interesting, like I wasn't expecting that. So it kind of took me off guard. And I think that they probably see themselves as characters within these stories, right? Or they relate to them at the level of themselves, perhaps, right? And I
Mm,
think for me, when I access memory, it's really kind of murky, and it really sort of happens with me visually, which is why I think I kind of write that way. So I just kind of told them like it's a mixture between what's real and what's not real, and that I really enjoy kind of, swimming in that soup of not knowing if it really happened or if it, if it didn't happen, or if I'm exaggerating it. And I think that's where I land as well,
mhm.
it is in that space too.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it leads into our next question, which is how does writing poetry impact the way you experience the world?
Oh, yeah, it's the I think it's just a matter of observation for me. I think that for me at least, poetry's always been a a kind of a visceral process first.
Mhm,
So that would kind of entail like, physically putting myself into places.
mhm,
And for me, that's usually because of where I grew up and where I live. That's usually um, in forests or in mountains or by rivers or whatever.
mhm.
And I think that for me, at least, that kind of allows a particular kind of headspace and a calmness as well.
Yeah.
But I also think like just on the level of interacting with other people's work as well,
Mm,
reading a lot and taking like a real particular joy, but also an obsession on how people I use a language,
Mhm.
and I think those two very important. So like the physical aspect of getting out into nature, but then also sort of delving into other people's expressions of poetry as well.
Mhm. Yeah, that's one of the biggest pieces of advice that we get on these interviews is to read other people's work, just to see how they experience
Yeah,
the world. Mhm.
yeah, I think that's been interesting to me. Like I tend to read um like if I'm gonna write a picture book, I tend to read more poetry than I do picture books.
Mm.
And I think that's, I mean, all of these things are really idiosyncratic. They're kind of based on your own process, but I tend to do that. I tend to kind of, I find myself in other genres when I'm ready to write something in a particular genre. I
Mhm.
don't know why, but I think it perhaps has to do with a um like I don't want to be sort of producing a kind of sameness all the time. So
Mhm.
I think sometimes if I'm reading a ton of poetry and then I'm writing poetry, sometimes I don't feel so great about that. And
Mhm.
to switch genres, like, maybe I'll read like a geography, like a textbook or something. And it's the same with picture books as well.
Mhm. Yeah, it all kind of informs each other in really cool ways.
Yes, absolutely.
So our final question is one I like to ask everybody. It's kind of a bit of a fun question. Um, so do you have any writing rituals like listening to music, making a tea or coffee, or lighting a candle before you start?
So my routine is very specific. So um so I wake up in the morning. I always have to exercise
Mm,
before I write. So I do some type of exercise, and then it's usually like I get the kids off to school, right? Then it's coffee and writing,
mm,
and um and then I have to swim somehow and then write again. That's the only,
mm,
it's very, very weird. I apologize for being weird. So I have to swim somewhere. I don't like pools, so it'd have to be like the lake or in the ocean, just
mm,
kind of like a dip. And then I'll come back and I write some more.
mm,
So that's when the kids are in school, that's my that's my routine. And it never really changes. I'm really stubborn about that's just how it works. Yeah.
mm. Yeah, that's really cool. Routine definitely, I feel like, is essential in my own creative practice too. If I fall off the routine, then there's nothing coming out of this brain. So I get it. I
Yeah,
understand.
it's so interesting. I think when I was younger, I used to kind of wait for being, I guess, quote unquote inspired.
Mhm.
But now I just, I think like in the last maybe 10 years or so, I've just sort of seen it as work, like
Mhm.
just as writing as work. So so like no matter what, I'll just sort of show up to that particular job and start working, right? Some days are better than others, but that's the way it is. But for me, that routine is is essential. I really kind of crave it, and I need it.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. It's been a pleasure having you here. Um, and I want to wish you a good luck with the rest of your day.
Yeah, all right. Well, thanks a lot. It was a pleasure. I really appreciate the thoughtful questions.
Yeah, thank you.